So, hi everybody, welcome to July's edition of Working in Sustainable Technology. And this month we are exploring the topic of biodiversity. So, biodiversity is that intricate web of life that sustains ecosystems, it regulates our climate, and provides us with countless resources. And it affects so much of our daily lives, including providing us with clean air, pollinating our crops, providing natural flood defences, disease control, and climate regulation. And economically, it can influence agriculture, tourism, and even pharmaceuticals. However, as we all know, it is under unprecedented threat from human activity. And the threat to our planet's biodiversity is far reaching and involves much more than just the habitat destruction that people often first think of. It's impacted by climate change, pollution, overexploitation, and invasive species. But thankfully, there are people like our guests today who are working to preserve healthy ecosystems for I think it's 8.7 million species on Earth and build a resilient planet for us all. So we are joined today by Tim Coles from rePLANET, who work on developing carbon and biodiversity projects and credits, as well as nature-based consultancy, and Chris Burnett from Map Impact, who work with development projects to assess and improve biodiversity net gain. So to get us started, I will hand over to Chris to tell us about what his journey into the sector and what he is working on. Chris?
Thanks very much, Sherry. So yeah, I'll just start sharing my slides now. Okay. So thank you very much for having me. It's nice to meet you all. So I'm Chris Burnett. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and one of the co-founders of Map Impact. And I thought I would start today by just telling you a little bit about myself and how I've ended up working in this particular space. So I'm a map geek by heart. I grew up loving maps. I always used to sort of, draw on my granddad's road atlas and look at Ordnance Survey maps. And so it led to a boyhood dream to work in mapping. And so I pursued a degree in cartography and map making. And I've been working for 21 years now in the geospatial or mapping sector. And I started out as a topographic surveyor, so someone who was working outdoors a lot for a year, working up and down the UK until I got tired of the weather, decided to be more office-based. And I got more involved in lots of different data capture techniques when it comes to mapping. So worked with aerial survey, and then moved into GIS, Geographical Information Systems. So working with the data capture techniques and then actually converting those into maps. And then I moved into remote sensing, so using satellite data about 10 years ago now. And that coincided with a move to the Middle East, where there's a lot of urban development projects going on out there, still carrying on in Saudi Arabia, the likes of NEOM that you might be familiar with. And I really then started to understand the power of satellite data for environmental applications. The fact that you could access imagery that covers large areas, you could access imagery that goes back in time, you can create a baseline map, you can monitor the condition of biodiversity over time as well from satellite. And that really opened my eyes to the power of what it can do. No longer was it difficult to get an aircraft in airspace over London. You could just simply acquire a satellite image and away you go. So I worked with ecologists quite closely during that time in the Middle East and have developed a more broader understanding of ecology in alignment with mapping and how we can use mapping to assist ecologists. And so that led to me co-founding Map Impact with my colleagues just over a year ago now. So we're Bristol based. Obviously we've not been operating that long, but we've grown quite significantly in that time. And why are we doing this? Well, we've set this company up because we believe that nature can be improved in harmony with human activity. So we're not sort of one or the other. We think both can coexist. But our key mantra here is collaboration. There are a lot of companies working in this space. We're all working towards the same goal, and it's really important that we collaborate and use technology to add value. So we are an environmental services company, but we are using satellite technology as a tool to derive those insights. And we're developing novel products that measure the performance of natural assets. And the goal there is to constantly measure that performance over time and understand how biodiversity is changing. And so we're doing this, as Cherry mentioned, to support the biodiversity net gain legislation. Again, that's another reason why we founded this biodiversity net gain legislation. Came in February, and it requires every new development within England to ensure that there is a net gain of biodiversity by introducing new habitats or improving the condition of those habitats. So we're using satellite data to understand how that can be done. And because there's a shortage of ecologists currently, we're trying to use satellite data as a screening tool to help ecologists understand where to go and what to focus on. So we developed our first product, Biodiversity View, back in November. It's all satellite derived. It covers the whole of England, and will soon cover Scotland and Wales as well. And it covers the whole country. It's on demand. It's available right now. And it provides you an idea of biodiversity from satellite data every 50 meters across the whole country. And we're supplying that data to landowners. That could be property developers. It could be local authorities. It could also be ecologists directly as well. But this is a screening tool. So we're not here to replace ecologists. We're here to help them, as I said earlier, to help them understand where to focus their attention. So in terms of who we are, here's a picture of some of my my wonderful colleagues. We've actually grown to about just under 20 people in a very short space of time. So yeah, quite considerable growth. And just to talk about some of the people that we have working with us, we have Earth observation scientists. So those are the people that work directly with the satellite data, extract the information from that data, and allow users to interpret that. So what habitats can we see? What's the condition of the habitats? That's their role. We have geospatial scientists as well that convert that information into maps and provide that data in a format that can be understood by our customers. And then we have an engineering team that consists of software developers and software engineers. So they take the work that the scientists have created and formulated and created the methodologies for, and then they scale that up across the whole country. So we're using cloud computing, we're using vast archives of data to create these countrywide data sets. We also have some statisticians as well. So they're looking at what information can we derive from the data and produce some statistics, meaningful statistics to customers that could tell them, firstly, what's the accuracy of our product? Secondly, how is biodiversity improving over time as well? And then we've got product managers as well who manage the development of Biodiversity View and other products that we're looking at creating, looking at how we improve them, listening to customer feedback and implementing that into the product as well. And then we've got several sales roles, such as account managers, business development managers, and product marketing managers who are promoting that product, who are marketing the product as well, developing our website, and working with the product manager to basically get our products out there and have them understood by our clients. So I would say, we're constantly looking to grow this team. We've we've got quite a big focus at the moment on growth in the technical areas in terms of the scientists, the developers and the engineers, because we're looking at, we're not sort of stopping at biodiversity view, we're looking at other products as well. So that's where our growth is likely to be over the next 1 to 2 years. And then in terms of the client, some of the client roles that we deal with as well, who we work with, as I mentioned, we work closely with ecologists directly. We've actually partnered with an ecology company as well, so we now have some ecologists working directly with us as well, which is great. We also work with project managers on large infrastructure projects that require an understanding of biodiversity. Engineering and environmental consultants as well, who require our data to understand what's in their project area, and GIS analysts as well. Everything we do is designed to be incorporated into a geographical information system. So we work very closely with a wide range of GIS analysts. And just to wrap this up, just to talk a little bit about what keeps me up at night, but also what I see as opportunities for Map Impact as well. I mean, funding. We're a small business. We have grown rapidly. We need to keep operating. What we've done there is we focused on the product, as I've mentioned, but we also have a consultancy arm, and we work on projects as well. So we've done some work in the Middle East to ensure we're getting business in and bringing in revenue. Technology. So working in this particular space and working with ecologists, it's really important that they trust it, they understand it, so that it can be adopted and can help the biodiversity crisis. So the opportunity for us there, talks like these in terms of educating our audience and thought leadership, and promoting the technology that we're using. Competition is another one. As I mentioned, there are a lot of companies working in this space, but we are actively collaborating with a lot of people. We're looking at bringing products together, combining products together with some of our competitors to solve a lot of the problems that are out there in this space. And then the hybrid remote working culture. I mean, we're pretty much fully remote, I would say. We do have an office here in Bristol where some of us work, and the challenge there is obviously in maintaining communication, as it is for a lot of us who work in this way these days. But I would say there's a huge advantage there for us in that we can hire the best people anywhere. It doesn't limit us at all to who we want to bring into the company, and as meant we've been able to recruit some really good talent. So that's it from me. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight to what we do and who we are. Thank you very much for your time.
Super. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for sharing that. And that's amazing growth in such a short time frame. Fantastic. I'm really like the point at the end around that focus on collaboration. That's one of the amazing things I found over the last 3 years of working in this climate sector, is the appetite for collaboration between companies to solve problems that are bigger than all of us. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. And now Tim Coles from rePLANET. I don't know if you're sharing slides or not, Tim. If not, fine. I've made you a co-host just in case. So yeah, Tim, take the floor.
Right, okay, so I'm Tim Coles. I've spent my entire life in biodiversity monitoring in one form or another. I started in the Environment Agency and then set up IEMA, Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and then set up Operation Wallacea, which is an organisation that basically surveys biodiversity long term. So we have a huge network of academics doing that in all sorts of different places around the world. And then my current role is as CEO of an organisation called rePLANET, and that's there to show that the private sector can actually significantly invest in wildlife conservation. So it's funded by, started by a guy called Andre Hoffman, who's very famous in the sort of nature finance world. And his argument was that, look, I've funded philanthropy for many years and it's fantastic until you stop. And as soon as you stop, everything seems to collapse. So what he wanted was to see if private sector could be brought in as a way of funding some of these projects. And the idea was to have investment that, you know, as an investor got an opportunity of investing in a shopping centre or an infrastructure project. Could that also include conservation projects? If the returns were okay for them, then it would attract large scale funding, and you'll see how that works in a few moments. So that's what I work in. I heard Chris mentioned the shortage of ecologists. The advantage of a shortage of ecologists, it means you start getting paid properly for once. Remember, when I trained as an ecologist, and I thought, I won't make any money, but it'll be a fun life. Well, I was correct. You don't make a lot of money, or you didn't make a lot of money as an ecologist. Things have massively changed, massively. So every company, every planning authority is now looking for ecologists. And there's some very, very well-paid jobs in this sector now. So when I lecture to students, I always say, look, you're the golden generation. You're not doing it for fun anymore. You're doing it because you can actually make a living out of it, and a decent living. Anyway, so we fund our projects through carbon and biodiversity credits. And so what I thought would probably be helpful would be to explain how a biodiversity unit of gain works, how a biodiversity credit works, rather than just talk about my career and stuff like that, which I think was the original proposal. I thought you could at least walk away with some bit of information that you could utilize in the future. Okay, so in climate, the currency is a ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, not emitted or sequestered. Everybody knows that. There's lots of methodologies that produce outputs, but they're all produced in that currency, a ton of carbon dioxide. In biodiversity, what's the equivalent? We have 36 different methodologies operating at the moment, producing outputs in completely different forms. So you can't compare them. So if you're an investor, you can't say which is the best investment that I've made on this. Sorry, it'll quieten down in a moment. Right. So what we did is we formed a very large consultation group to quantify what was a unit of biodiversity gain. And if you think of something like the Consumer Price Index, that's a basket of goods and services that we all price up, every country, every year, and works out our annual inflation rates. And we compare those inflation rates across countries. But every country's got a completely different basket of goods and services. And so they should, because that's what they're buying. But if you can use that concept of having a different basket of goods and services or a financial instrument, and then you compare between inflation rates, why can't you do the same for conservation? And so the idea is to have a basket of metrics that reflect what you're trying to achieve for a particular site. And I've just given a talk in the next door room on precisely this. So if you've got an Indonesian coral reef, and it's been bomb fished and cyanide fished, and you want to know, is it getting better now we've protected it? What would you measure? And that would be things like rugosity, how many holes, nooks and crannies there are in it, how many herbivorous fish, species richness and abundance of herbivorous and piscivorous fish, coral cover, species richness and biomass, the commercially exploited invertebrates. All of those improve, you say, wow, that reef is getting better. So that's what you'd measure. But that's useless when you go to a farm in southern England, you're going to rewild it because you're not trying to improve coral cover there. There you're trying to improve soil health, etc. So what you do is you pick your metrics that reflect what you're trying to achieve, and then you measure them at time zero and then at future times to see how the biodiversity is changing. And when I say metrics, let's now use the word taxa instead, which is essentially a group of species. Functional taxa, like say soil invertebrates, they all live in the soil, but not slightly bit related. Or zoological taxa, like butterflies. And you measure the entire lot, 5 lots of those taxa. And when you do that, let's take breeding birds. You measure all your breeding birds there, but you've now got a list of them, but they're not all equal in value. Some are much more important than others. So you weight them according to their species, their conservation value. So if it's a red listed species, you score a 5. If it's a least concern, you score it a 1. But when you hear about 70% of the world's biodiversity declining, that's not loss of species, that's loss of populations and biomass. And so you allocate a relative abundance value to each of those species as well on a 1 to 5 scale. And that relative abundance is the lowest is obviously at 1, but what's the maximum you're likely to have in that habitat? And you'd get that from the reference site. So you've now got an abundance score and a conservation value score for each species. You multiply those two together, and then you do that for every one of the breeding grade species, you add them all up, and that gives you a value. And when you go back 2 or 3 years later, you should have a higher value. Now, that's a percentage difference from when you started. But your soil invertebrates have changed, your detritivores, your pollinators, your higher plants have all changed by different percentages. So to look at the overall improvement, you take the median value and you multiply that by hectares, and that gives you the number of units of biodiversity gain. And that allows you to do to define what is a unit of biodiversity change. It's a 1% gain per hectare in the median value of a basket of metrics that are meeting the conservation objective for the site and have permanence and additionality. And that allows companies then, when they are investing in projects, carbon projects, for example, they can quantify what their biodiversity is, as well as their carbon. And they can either use it to increase the price of the carbon. You know, they can say, look, every one of our carbon credits has got a 50% increase in biodiversity, or they can actually utilize it as an income stream. Now, you know, if Chris or I go to a site and we say, you know, you've got a 40% increase in biodiversity, who the hell is going to believe you? Because we're paid to do that. So you need some independent verification. And this is where the Biodiversity Futures Initiative comes in. And that's a group of academics, about 50 academics from around the world, different universities. And what they'll do is they take your claim. So for every piece of data, so if we're doing metabarcoding, all the bioinformatics, all the camera trap data, the sound data, all the digital data. And what they do is they subsample that and they compare it against your data sheets, and then they recalculate each metric and recalculate the overall improvement. And they give you 1 of 3 answers. One is, yes, you've got your 30% increase. No, you haven't. We think it's closer to 20% after you've recalculated. Or worst of all, go away. It's done so badly we can't quantify it. So to avoid that one happening, they introduced a stage 1 process where you submit your site. You know, what's your polygon? What are you going to do at that site? What metrics are you using? How do you quantify each of those metrics? What's your methodologies? What's your sampling strategy? And the advantage of that is once they've agreed that, they can't fail you. You might not get a biodiversity increase, but they can't fail you for measuring the wrong things. So we do that for every one of our projects. And it means that academics can provide that peer review for corporates or for World Banks or philanthropists that are investing in projects that can actually verify the size of that biodiversity gain. So we run a series of projects all around the world, mainly driven by carbon for the top ones. And there, in those cases, then we're increasing the value of the carbon by quantifying the biodiversity gain that each one of those credits is getting. But if you look further down that list, you'll see there are some that are only biodiversity credits. Oops, I'm taking it off. So how on earth does that work? Well, there you've got to start getting biodiversity credits sold separately. And that is a big ask. Because if I go to an investor, which I regularly do, and say, look, give me $5 million to restore this ecosystem, and I'll pay you back in carbon credits. That's fine. They know what the price of carbon credits is going to be, or what they don't, but they have a guess of what they're going to be over the next 25, 30 years. If I went to them and said, give me $5 million for a biodiversity credit producing project, they'll say, okay, well, what's the price of a biodiversity credit in 2028? In other words, if I invest in this, can I resell and make my money back again? So you'll never get a single investor. So you're looking at this stage for multiple investors, particularly philanthropists. And what they're doing is they're investing in projects. They don't want to put 5 million in, but they'll put $500,000 in because they want to see biodiversity credits come to the market, and they want to invest in that project anyway because it's a worthwhile project. So they've written it off in a sense. But what we're then doing is offering the biodiversity credits. They get those back as they invest in the project. They get the biodiversity credits back, and that allows them to take it to the market. And I am sure they'll get the money back because the demand for biodiversity credits is enormous from traders, from family offices, from corporates. and yet the supply is virtually zero. It's like looking for a fairy in the woodland. Everyone talks about these things, but you try and find them. They don't exist as yet. So we see this as the way in which that can get started. Anyway, I'll just finish at that there. So in terms of the types of roles that we have in our company, we have GIS people and models like that. We have ecologists, a lot of ecologists, people that understand carbon markets. We have financiers, and we have about 30 people working in the UK at the moment, and then about another 30 or so overseas in different projects. So, you know, if you're an ecologist out there looking to get into this world, you've chosen a good one. You could make a huge difference here. If we can get the private sector, and not just us, but other people using this sort of approach, we get the private sector to see an investment in restoring cattle grazing land, for example, in Costa Rica, which is where I'm going tomorrow. We restore 30% of the land, and the other 70% is put into rotational grazing. If you can get people to invest in projects like that, and they can get a 12 to 15% return, IRR, that's equivalent to what they get for investing in a shopping centre or an infrastructure project. And it has the massive benefit that you can go home at night and sleep because you're doing something positive, not just for the environment, but in that case, because you're increasing farmer incomes and you're increasing carbon, you're improving biodiversity, you're also increasing the amount of food that's produced on each area of land because the rotational grazing is so much more efficient. Anyway, I'll leave it at that and we'll open it to questions then.
That's fab. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tim. And I really loved that learning at the beginning. I learned a lot I didn't know there, and so complex and interconnected and difficult to calculate all of these things, which is why the work you're doing to try and make it clear and quantifiable is so important. So yeah, thank you so much.